Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
The birthday party was in full swing when my mother grabbed my arm and pointed toward the corner. "Clyde, you're sitting there tonight, next to the gift table." I stared at the folding chair positioned like a servant's post, while my sister Amanda's wealthy friends occupied the main dining table. "But Mom, this is family dinner." She cut me off. "Amanda specifically requested this. You know how important tonight is for her law firm connections." 28 years old, and I was still the family disappointment. Little did they know what was coming. The late afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my parents' pristine colonial home in Westchester County as I pulled my modest Honda Civic behind a row of luxury sedans and SUVs. Mercedes BMWs and a gleaming Porsche Cayenne lined the circular driveway like status symbols at a country club gathering. I grabbed the small gift bag from my passenger seat and walked toward the imposing front door, already hearing the sounds of animated conversation and clinking glasses from inside. My mother, Patricia, opened the door before I could knock, her perfectly styled silver hair catching the light as she looked past me toward the driveway. "Oh, good you're here. We need you to move some of these cars around so the Hendersons can park closer to the house. Margaret has been having trouble with her hip." She handed me a notepad with license plate numbers. "These need to go down by the mailbox." I spent the next 20 minutes playing automotive Tetris, while guests continued arriving. Through the windows, I could see Amanda holding court in the living room, gesturing dramatically in her emerald green designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant updo that showcased the diamond earrings our parents had given her for Christmas. She looked every inch the successful attorney she'd become. When I finally made it inside, the transformation of our childhood home was remarkable. White roses and gold accents decorated every surface. Catered hors d'oeuvres circulated on silver trays carried by uniformed servers. The dining room table groaned under the weight of an elaborate spread that could have fed 50 people, though only 20 were expected. "Clyde, there you are." My father Robert approached with his characteristic measured tone, the same voice he'd used in boardrooms before his retirement from the investment firm. His salt and pepper hair was impeccably combed, and his navy blazer bore the subtle sheen of expensive fabric. "Could you help bring up some additional wine from the cellar? The caterers seem to be running low on the Chardonnay already." I descended into the basement, passing walls lined with my father's extensive wine collection. Each bottle represented years of careful selection and substantial investment. As I selected several bottles of the requested vintage, I could hear footsteps and laughter from the floor above. The sound felt distant, like I was listening to a party I wasn't really part of. Returning upstairs with the wine, I encountered Amanda for the first time that evening. She was standing near the kitchen island, surrounded by 3 women in equally expensive attire. Their conversation paused as I approached. "Oh, this is my younger brother Clyde," Amanda said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's still figuring things out, but we love him anyway." The women nodded politely, their expressions shifting to the careful neutrality reserved for family members who hadn't quite met expectations. One of them, a redhead with a prominent law firm pin on her lapel, asked, "What field are you in, Clyde?" Before I could answer, Amanda jumped in. "He's been working on some computer projects, very technical stuff, still in the development phase." Her tone carried the diplomatic dismissal of someone accustomed to managing uncomfortable conversations. The women made appropriate sounds of encouragement before Amanda smoothly redirected the discussion to a recent case her firm had won. I stood there for another moment holding the wine bottles before quietly making my way back to the kitchen. The evening continued in this vein. I helped arrange flowers, moved furniture to accommodate the photographer Amanda had hired, and answered the door for late arriving guests. Each time someone asked about my occupation, Amanda appeared like a social coordinator, steering conversations away from topics that might reflect poorly on the family's image of success. As dinner time approached, I assumed I'd join everyone at the extended dining room table that had been set with our mother's finest china and crystal. The centerpiece alone probably cost more than most people spent on entire dinner parties. Tall tapers flickered in silver candelabras while soft jazz played from hidden speakers. That's when my mother appeared beside me with her directive about the corner seating arrangement. The folding chair looked almost comically out of place next to the gift table, separated from the main gathering by several feet of Persian carpet. From that vantage point, I'd have a perfect view of everyone else enjoying the celebration, while I sat alone like a museum guard. "This is what Amanda wanted?" I asked, hoping I'd misunderstood. "She's concerned about the conversation topics tonight." Patricia explained, adjusting her pearl necklace nervously. "There are some very important clients here, and she doesn't want any distractions from the professional atmosphere she's trying to maintain." As I took my assigned seat, I watched the other guests settle into their places around the main table. Amanda sat at the head, flanked by her boyfriend Derek, and a distinguished-looking man I recognized as one of the senior partners from her law firm. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by appreciative laughter and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. Derek caught my eye and raised his wine glass in a mock toast. "Thanks for all your help tonight, man. Always good to have extra hands around." His tone carried the casual condescension of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. His tailored shirt and Swiss watch suggested a comfort with luxury that came from years of success in investment banking. The first course arrived, and I realized I hadn't been included in the catering count. A server approached me apologetically and whispered that they'd prepare a plate for me in the kitchen when they had a moment. The humiliation of sitting alone was now compounded by the prospect of eating separately like hired help, taking a break from their duties. As the evening progressed and wine flowed freely around the main table, the conversations grew more animated. I heard fragments about market trends, legal strategies, and vacation plans to European destinations. The world they inhabited seemed to exist on a different plane entirely, one where success was measured in billable hours and investment returns. From my isolated perch beside the gift table, I had an unobstructed view of the social dynamics playing out around the dining room. The carefully orchestrated seating arrangement became increasingly clear as the evening progressed. Amanda had positioned herself strategically between the most influential guests, ensuring maximum exposure to the right conversations and networking opportunities. My Aunt Martha, my father's younger sister, arrived fashionably late from her drive down from Connecticut. She scanned the room with sharp eyes, taking in the elaborate setup and guest list. Unlike many of our relatives, Martha had built her own successful consulting business and possessed an unfiltered directness that often made family gatherings interesting. She spotted me in the corner and made her way over, navigating around clusters of guests with purposeful strides. "Clyde, sweetheart, what are you doing hidden away over here?" She gestured toward the main table with obvious confusion. "Surely you should be sitting with the family for Amanda's birthday celebration." Her voice carried clearly across the room, and I noticed several heads turning in our direction. Amanda's perfectly composed expression flickered with something approaching panic as she excused herself from her conversation with the senior partner and glided toward us. "Aunt Martha, how wonderful that you could make it." Amanda interrupted smoothly, positioning herself between Martha and me with practiced ease. "We were just discussing the seating arrangements. Clyde volunteered to help us manage the gift organization tonight. Such a thoughtful gesture, really." Martha's eyebrows rose skeptically. Gift organization at a family birthday party. She looked between Amanda and me with growing comprehension. "I see. And I suppose this arrangement allows for better conversation flow at the main table." "Exactly," Amanda replied, her relief evident. "We have several clients here tonight, and you know how business discussions can get quite intense. We thought it might be more comfortable for everyone this way. Before Martha could respond further, Amanda skillfully guided her toward the main table, introducing her to various guests and highlighting her business accomplishments. I watched as Martha was absorbed into the central group, her protests effectively neutralized by Amanda's social maneuvering. My father approached the corner table carrying a small plate of appetizers. His expression suggested the awkwardness of the situation wasn't lost on him, but his loyalty to Amanda's wishes remained unwavering. "I brought you something to eat," he said quietly, setting the plate down beside me. "I know this isn't ideal, son, but Amanda worked very hard to arrange tonight. These connections are crucial for her career advancement." "I understand," I replied, though the words tasted bitter. Family loyalty means supporting each other's professional goals. Robert nodded, missing, or choosing to ignore the subtle edge in my voice. "That's exactly right. Sometimes we have to make small sacrifices for the greater good of the family's reputation." He paused, glancing back toward the main table where animated discussions continued. "Your sister has worked incredibly hard to reach this level. We need to do everything possible to support her success." As he returned to his seat, I processed the implications of his words. My presence at the main table apparently represented a threat to the family's reputation. My accomplishments, whatever they might be, were deemed insufficient for public display among Amanda's professional circle. The conversation at the main table had shifted to vacation planning. Derek was describing a recent trip to Napa Valley, complete with private wine tastings and helicopter tours. Other guests contributed stories of European adventures and exotic destinations. The assumption seemed to be that everyone present operated at a similar level of financial success and leisure opportunities. Amanda caught the attention of the senior partner, a distinguished man named Harrison, who commanded respect even among this accomplished group. "Harrison, I'd love your thoughts on the Henderson merger. Your expertise in corporate restructuring could provide exactly the insight we need." The conversation that followed showcased Amanda's legal knowledge and strategic thinking. She asked thoughtful questions and contributed meaningful observations that demonstrated her value to the firm. Watching her perform, I had to admit she possessed genuine talent and had earned her professional success through merit, not just connections. But then she glanced in my direction, and our eyes met for a moment. Instead of the warmth I might have expected from a sister, I saw calculation. She was measuring the risk I represented to this carefully constructed evening, evaluating whether my presence might somehow undermine the impression she was working to create. Derek noticed the exchange and followed her gaze toward my corner. "Amanda tells me your brother is working on some kind of startup venture," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "That's admirable, really. Takes courage to pursue the entrepreneurial path, even if the statistics are pretty discouraging." Several guests turned their attention to this new topic of conversation. I could sense Amanda's tension increasing as the spotlight shifted in an unwelcome direction. "Oh, it's still very early stage," Amanda said quickly. "More of a hobby project, really. Nothing concrete enough to discuss in detail yet." Martha, who had been quietly observing from her seat at the main table, spoke up with characteristic bluntness. "Nonsense, Amanda. Clyde's been working on his technology project for years now. Surely there must be some significant progress to report by this point." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as everyone processed Martha's implicit challenge to Amanda's dismissive characterization. I could see Amanda struggling to maintain her composure, while frantically calculating how to redirect the conversation without appearing openly dismissive of her own brother. Harrison leaned forward with polite interest. "Technology ventures can be quite lucrative when they succeed. What sector are you focusing on, Clyde?" Before I could respond, Amanda stood up with sudden decisiveness. "You know what, everyone, Clyde has been so helpful tonight with all the practical arrangements. I think we should let him get back to managing the gift situation rather than putting him on the spot about work projects." She turned to me with a smile that looked genuine to outside observers but carried a clear warning. Would you mind checking on whether we need additional space for any late arriving presents? And perhaps you could organize them by size for the thank you note process later. The message was unmistakable. Return to your assigned role and stop drawing attention to yourself. I nodded and turned my attention to the gift table, effectively ending the uncomfortable moment for Amanda, while reinforcing my position as the evening's designated helper rather than honored guest. But as I arranged wrapped packages and gift bags, according to Amanda's instructions, my phone vibrated in my pocket with an incoming message. I glanced at the screen and saw a text from my business partner Jason that would change everything about this humiliating evening. The irony was about to become overwhelming. The text message from Jason was brief but loaded with implications that made my hands tremble slightly as I read it. Board meeting concluded. Final offer accepted pending your approval. Timeline moved up. Need your decision tonight. This is it, Clyde. 91 million total, your 70% equals 64 million. Life-changing moment. Call when you can. I stared at the screen, reading the words multiple times to ensure I wasn't hallucinating. 3 years of relentless development work, countless 18-hour days, and more rejection meetings than I cared to remember had culminated in this moment. TechCorp, one of the largest software companies in the world, wanted to acquire our artificial intelligence platform. The technology I'd been developing in my modest apartment had caught the attention of industry giants. The irony was suffocating. While my family treated me like an unemployed burden at my sister's birthday party, I was moments away from becoming a multi-millionaire through the very work they consistently dismissed as unrealistic fantasy. The startup they'd characterized as a hobby project was about to generate more wealth than most people accumulated in entire lifetimes. From my corner position, I watched Amanda entertaining her guests with animated stories about recent legal victories. Her laugh carried across the room as she described outmaneuvering opposing counsel in a complex negotiation. The confidence in her voice reflected years of professional accomplishment and social recognition. Derek raised his wine glass in appreciation. That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking that separates truly successful professionals from the rest of the pack. It's all about reading people accurately and positioning yourself for maximum advantage. The other guests murmured agreement, and I noticed how naturally they assumed their own membership in this exclusive category of successful professionals. The conversation reinforced an unspoken hierarchy where financial achievement and social status determined worthiness of inclusion. My phone buzzed again with another message from Jason. Media interest is building. TechCorp wants to announce tomorrow morning if we agree tonight. This timing could maximize stock impact for everyone involved. What do you think? Tomorrow morning. Less than 12 hours from now, my name would be associated with one of the largest technology acquisitions of the year. The same family members who'd seated me at the gift table like hired help would wake up to discover that their disappointment had achieved something they'd never imagined possible. But the weight of that realization brought unexpected sadness rather than vindication. These were the people who should have been celebrating my success, offering encouragement during difficult periods, and sharing pride in my accomplishments. Instead, they'd chosen to hide me away rather than risk embarrassment among their professional contacts. Harrison was discussing the challenges of maintaining client relationships in an increasingly competitive legal market. The key is demonstrating consistent value while building personal connections that transcend individual cases. Clients want to feel confident that their legal representation understands both the technical aspects and the broader strategic implications. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly why evenings like this are so important for relationship building. When clients see you as a complete person with family values and social connections, it creates trust that extends beyond billable hours. Family values. The phrase hung in the air as I contemplated the manipulation required to maintain her version of family presentation. Hiding your own brother to avoid uncomfortable questions hardly seemed consistent with traditional family values, but perhaps I was applying outdated standards to modern professional networking. My father caught my eye and gestured toward the kitchen, apparently expecting me to check on something related to the catering arrangements. As I stood to comply with his unspoken request, my phone vibrated with a third message from Jason. Just got word that 3 major tech journalists want exclusive interviews if we move forward. This could be bigger than we anticipated. You deserve this moment, partner. Let me know what you decide. Walking toward the kitchen, I passed close enough to the main table to overhear a conversation between 2 of Amanda's colleagues about their children's educational achievements. Private schools' advanced placement courses and early admission to prestigious universities dominated their discussion. The assumption seemed to be that success was hereditary, passed down through families that valued achievement and provided appropriate guidance. The Hendersons' youngest just received early admission to Stanford, one woman was saying. Their family has always emphasized academic excellence and professional preparation. It's wonderful when children live up to that kind of potential. Another guest added, "That's the advantage of strong family support systems. When parents model success and maintain high expectations, children naturally follow similar paths." I paused near the kitchen doorway, struck by the contrast between their conversation and my actual situation. Here I was, on the verge of a success that would dwarf most of their accomplishments, while my own family had literally separated me from their celebration to avoid potential embarrassment. In the kitchen, I found one of the catering staff arranging dessert plates with precision that would have impressed a museum curator. Each slice of Amanda's custom birthday cake was garnished identically, and champagne flutes stood ready for the traditional toast. The attention to detail reflected the importance Amanda placed on this evening's impression management. "Excuse me," the caterer said politely. "Are you with the family? We weren't sure about serving arrangements for the gentleman at the gift table." Even the hired staff had noticed my unusual positioning. "That's fine," I replied. "I'll grab something later if needed." Returning to my corner post, I found that the conversation had shifted to real estate investments. Derek was explaining his recent purchase of a vacation property in the Hamptons, complete with detailed descriptions of square footage, proximity to exclusive beaches, and appreciation potential. The other guests contributed similar stories of property acquisitions and market timing strategies. "Location is everything," Derek concluded. "You want properties that signal success while providing solid investment returns. It's about building wealth and lifestyle simultaneously." The discussion reinforced the evening's ongoing theme of success measurement through external validation. Houses, cars, vacation destinations, and professional titles all served as scorecards in a complex social ranking system that I'd apparently failed to navigate successfully. My phone buzzed with what I assumed would be another message from Jason, but this time the sender was my apartment building's management company, lease renewal documents attached. Please respond by week's end if you intend to continue residency. Thanks for being a great tenant. The timing was surreal. Here I was, contemplating a decision that would make lease renewals irrelevant while sitting in exile at my sister's birthday party. The modest one-bedroom apartment I'd called home for the past 3 years represented independence and focus on my work, rather than comfort or status. Soon I could afford any living situation imaginable. But as I looked around the room at my family and their guests, I wondered whether financial success would fundamentally change the dynamics that had led to this evening's humiliation. Would suddenly having wealth earn me a seat at the main table? Or would they simply find new reasons to maintain distance and control? The answer to that question was about to reveal itself in ways none of us could anticipate. I pulled out my phone and stared at the keyboard, weighing words that would change everything. The decision felt simultaneously momentous and surprisingly simple. After 3 years of believing in technology that others dismissed, watching my family treat my work as an embarrassing hobby, and sitting through this evening's systematic humiliation, clarity emerged with crystalline precision. My fingers moved across the screen with steady determination. Jason, execute the deal. Accept Tech Corp's offer immediately. Also cancel my apartment lease. Cancel my car lease. Cancel everything. I want a complete fresh start. Send the press release tonight. Let's make this official. I hit send and felt a strange calm settle over me as the message disappeared into cyberspace. Within seconds, my phone buzzed with Jason's response. Holy shit, Clyde. This is it. This is really it. I'm calling Tech Corp now. Press release goes live in 30 minutes. Welcome to your new life, multi-millionaire. From my corner position, I had a perfect view of the evening's continued performance. Amanda was describing her firm's recent expansion into international markets, emphasizing her role in developing the strategic framework that made overseas operations possible. Her audience listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated their own expertise and business acumen. The key to successful international expansion is understanding cultural nuances while maintaining consistent service quality. Amanda explained, gesturing with her wine glass for emphasis. We spent months developing relationships with local partners who could provide insights that textbooks simply can't teach. Harrison nodded approvingly. That kind of preparation separates firms that succeed globally from those that struggle with international transitions. Cultural intelligence is often underestimated in business planning. The conversation continued with various guests contributing examples from their own professional experiences. Stories of successful negotiations challenging clients and strategic victories created a sense of shared accomplishment among the group. They formed an exclusive club of achievers who understood each other's challenges and celebrated each other's successes. My phone began buzzing with notifications as Jason started the acquisition announcement process. Text messages, emails, and missed calls appeared on the screen in rapid succession. Industry contacts who'd been silent for months suddenly wanted to congratulate me, schedule meetings, and explore collaboration opportunities. The technology world moved quickly when significant news broke. But my family remained completely oblivious to the transformation occurring just feet away from their celebration. Derek was sharing advice about wine investment strategies while Amanda listened with apparent fascination. The conversation had evolved from professional accomplishments to lifestyle choices that reflected sophisticated taste and long-term financial planning. The key is finding vineyards with limited production runs and strong critical reviews, Derek explained. You want bottles that will appreciate significantly over 5 to 10-year periods, while providing personal enjoyment if you choose to consume rather than sell. One of Amanda's colleagues asked about storage considerations for serious wine collections. The discussion that followed revealed an intimate familiarity with climate-controlled systems insurance requirements and authentication process that protected valuable vintage investments. I found myself studying their conversation with detached interest, like an anthropologist observing rituals from an unfamiliar culture. The assumptions underlying their discussion assumed levels of disposable income and leisure time that most Americans never experienced. Yet they spoke as though these were universal concerns that any responsible adult would naturally address. My phone vibrated with a call from an unknown number. I glanced at the screen and recognized the area code as belonging to a major technology publication. News of the acquisition was already spreading through industry networks faster than Jason had anticipated. I declined the call and switched my phone to silent mode to avoid drawing unwanted attention. At the main table, my father was describing his recent retirement transition and the challenges of maintaining an active lifestyle without the structure of daily work responsibilities. The key is finding meaningful projects that provide purpose without the stress of previous career demands, he explained to sympathetic nods from other guests. Robert's comments struck me as particularly ironic, given his frequent criticism of my decision to leave law school for entrepreneurial pursuits. His definition of meaningful projects apparently didn't include the technology development work I'd been pursuing with single-minded determination for the past 3 years. That's exactly why family connections become so important during transition periods. Patricia added, joining the conversation with practiced ease. Having children who understand professional challenges and can provide appropriate support makes all the difference in successful retirement planning. Her words carried obvious pride in Amanda's achievements while containing an implicit dismissal of my own path. The subtext suggested that only certain types of children provided the kind of support that parents could discuss proudly in social settings. Amanda caught my eye across the room and offered a brief smile before returning her attention to Harrison, who was asking about her long-term career aspirations within the firm. Her response revealed ambitious goals and strategic thinking that would likely lead to partnership consideration within the next few years. Partnership requires demonstrating not just legal expertise, but also business development capabilities, Amanda explained. That means building client relationships, generating new opportunities, and contributing to the firm's overall strategic direction. The conversation reinforced my understanding of why this evening mattered so much to Amanda's professional trajectory. These weren't just casual social interactions, but carefully orchestrated networking opportunities that could influence her career advancement for years to come. My phone screen lit up with another text from Jason. Press release is live. TechCorp stock jumped 2% in after hours trading. 3 major publications want exclusive interviews tomorrow. This is happening fast, partner. Hope you're ready for everything to change. Everything to change. The phrase resonated as I looked around the room at family members who had no idea their carefully constructed evening was about to be turned completely upside down. The same technology work they'd dismissed as unrealistic was about to make headlines in publications their professional colleagues read regularly. But instead of anticipation or vindication, I felt something approaching sadness. These should have been the people celebrating my success, offering encouragement during difficult periods, and sharing pride in accomplishments that represented years of dedicated effort. Instead, they'd chosen to manage my presence like a potential embarrassment. The irony was about to become public in ways that would force everyone to confront assumptions they'd made about success achievement and family loyalty. Amanda's law firm colleague, a sharply dressed man named Bradley, who'd been relatively quiet throughout dinner, suddenly pulled out his phone and began scrolling through what appeared to be news notifications. His expression shifted from casual interest to focused attention as he read something on his screen. "This is interesting," Bradley said, looking up from his phone with evident excitement. "There's breaking news about a major technology acquisition. TechCorp just announced they're purchasing an artificial intelligence startup for $91 million. The company developed some kind of revolutionary software platform." Several guests immediately reached for their own phones, and the dinner conversation paused as people began checking news sources and financial websites. The timing was perfect in its dramatic irony, as my family's birthday celebration was interrupted by news of my own success. Derek scrolled through his market tracking app with obvious interest. $91 million is significant for a startup acquisition. TechCorp doesn't make those kinds of investments unless they see massive potential for market disruption. Harrison leaned forward with the focused attention of someone who understood merger and acquisition dynamics. The interesting question is whether this represents defensive strategy against competitors or genuine confidence in breakthrough technology. TechCorp tends to be conservative with their acquisition spending. Amanda maintained her composure, but I could see tension building around her eyes as the conversation shifted toward a topic that might somehow connect to her carefully managed family presentation. She had no way of knowing how close that connection actually was. Bradley continued reading from his phone. The startup is called Quantum Solutions, and apparently they've been developing their platform in stealth mode for 3 years. The founder is listed as... He paused, squinting at his screen before looking up with confusion. Clyde Morrison. That's an unusual coincidence. The room fell silent as everyone processed the name. Several guests turned to look at me, then back at Amanda, trying to piece together implications that seemed too extraordinary to be accurate. That can't be right, Derek said with a nervous laugh. Morrison is a pretty common surname. Must be someone else entirely. But Bradley was already pulling up additional sources on his phone, and his expression suggested the information was checking out across multiple publications. Actually, there's a photo here, and the company address is listed as... He rattled off my apartment building's address while staring directly at me. The silence that followed was deafening. 20 people who'd spent the evening discussing professional achievements and financial success suddenly realized that the family member they'd relegated to gift table duty had just completed a transaction that dwarfed most of their annual incomes. Amanda's face had gone completely pale as she struggled to process information that fundamentally challenged everything about the evening's careful orchestration. Her mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound, like someone trying to speak after having the wind knocked out of them. Martha broke the silence with characteristic directness. Well, this certainly puts a different perspective on the seating arrangements, doesn't it? My father stood up slowly, his usual composed demeanor replaced by visible confusion and something that might have been panic. Clyde, is this accurate information? Before I could respond, Harrison pulled out his own phone and began conducting what appeared to be more thorough research. As one of the region's most respected corporate attorneys, he had access to industry databases and professional networks that could verify acquisition details quickly. This appears to be legitimate, Harrison announced after several minutes of focused investigation. Multiple sources confirmed the transaction details, and the company profile matches what we're seeing here. He looked at me with something approaching awe. Clyde, is it true that you developed this technology platform yourself? The attention of every person in the room focused on me with an intensity that felt almost physical. These were the same people who'd spent the evening discussing their own accomplishments while I sat in the corner, like hired help. Now they were waiting for confirmation that the family disappointment had achieved something none of them had imagined possible. Yes, I said simply. I've been working on artificial intelligence applications for customer service automation. TechCorp approached us 3 months ago about potential acquisition opportunities. Derek's expression had shifted from condescension to something closer to panic as he realized his earlier jokes about the gift table supervisor had been directed towards someone who'd just become significantly wealthier than anyone at the table. But Amanda said you were unemployed, one of the women said with obvious confusion. She mentioned that you were still figuring out your career direction. Amanda found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Clyde never told us about any acquisition discussions. We knew he was working on computer projects, but you didn't think they were serious enough to mention to your professional colleagues? I finished keeping my tone neutral, despite the emotional weight of the moment. Patricia had been holding her wine glass so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. $64 million, she asked, as though saying the number out loud might somehow make it more comprehensible. That's my share of the acquisition price, I confirmed. 70% ownership of the company. The mathematical reality was sinking in around the table as people calculated implications that challenged every assumption they'd made about success achievement and family dynamics. The guests they'd excluded from serious conversation had accomplished something that would be discussed in business schools and industry publications for years to come. Harrison stood up and walked around the table toward my corner position, extending his hand with genuine respect. Clyde, I owe you an apology. We all do. This is an extraordinary achievement, and you should be celebrating with people who appreciate what you've accomplished. As he approached, other guests began standing as well, creating an impromptu receiving line of people who suddenly wanted to congratulate me, ask questions about my technology, and express regret for the evening's earlier treatment. But the person I was watching most closely was Amanda, who remained seated at the head of the table with tears beginning to form in her eyes as the full scope of the evening's irony became clear to everyone present. Harrison's handshake was firm and sustained the kind of professional gesture that acknowledged both respect and recognition of a significant business achievement. Clyde, I've been following TechCorp's acquisition strategy for years through various client interactions. They're extremely selective about their purchases. For them to offer $91 million represents validation from some of the smartest technology investors in the world. Behind him, other guests were forming what amounted to an impromptu reception line. Derek approached, next his earlier confidence replaced by visible nervousness as he extended his own hand. Man, I had no idea. Those comments earlier, I was completely out of line. This is incredible news. No hard feelings, I replied, accepting his handshake with genuine grace. You were working with the information you had available. But Derek's discomfort was obvious as he processed the implications of his earlier behavior. His jokes about event planning careers and gift table supervision had been directed towards someone whose professional accomplishments now overshadowed his own investment banking success by several orders of magnitude. Bradley approached with his phone still in hand, scrolling through additional coverage that was appearing on various news websites. The technology publications are calling this one of the most significant artificial intelligence acquisitions of the year. Forbes is already working on a profile piece. This is going to be huge for industry coverage. The mention of Forbes seemed to galvanize the remaining guests, who suddenly understood that they were in the presence of someone who would soon be featured in the same publications they read for business insights and professional development ideas. Amanda's law firm colleagues surrounded me with questions about the technology development timeline and strategic planning that had led to such a successful outcome. Their professional curiosity was genuine, but I could also sense the networking instinct that drove successful attorneys to build relationships with accomplished individuals across various industries. The artificial intelligence applications for legal research could be revolutionary, one of them observed. Document analysis case, precedent research contract review automation. Have you considered applications in the legal sector? Actually, legal applications were part of our original development focus. I replied, noticing Amanda's surprise at this revelation. Customer service automation was just the entry point for broader professional service applications. My father had been standing near his chair, seemingly frozen by the evening's rapid transformation. Finally, he approached with visible emotion and placed his hand on my shoulder. Son, I don't know what to say. We had no idea the scope of what you were building. We should have asked more questions, shown more interest in your work. His apology carried genuine remorse, but also confusion about how such a significant development had occurred without family awareness. Robert prided himself on understanding business dynamics and recognizing potential success indicators. Missing something this substantial challenged his fundamental assumptions about his own judgment. Patricia joined us with tears in her eyes, reaching out to embrace me with a warmth that had been notably absent earlier in the evening. Clyde, sweetheart, we're so proud of you. This is just, it's amazing. We should have supported you more, encouraged you more. You couldn't have known, I said, returning her embrace. I kept the acquisition discussions confidential until everything was finalized. But even as I offered reassurance, we both understood that the evening had revealed something deeper than simple communication gaps. The family's response to my perceived lack of success had exposed assumptions about worthiness achievement and social presentation that couldn't be easily explained away by missing information. Martha approached with characteristic directness and a smile that suggested she was enjoying the evening's dramatic reversals. Well, this certainly makes family dynamics more interesting, doesn't it? I have a feeling future birthday parties will involve very different seating arrangements. Her comment drew nervous laughter from several guests who were still processing the implications of what they'd witnessed. The transformation from family disappointment to celebrated entrepreneur had occurred so rapidly that social dynamics were struggling to catch up with new realities. But the person I was most concerned about was Amanda, who remained seated at the head of the table staring down at her hands while conversations swirled around her. The birthday celebration that was supposed to showcase her professional success and social connections had been completely overshadowed by news of her brother's achievement. Harrison noticed her distress and approached her chair with the diplomatic skills that had made him successful in complex negotiations. "Amanda, this must be quite a surprise for you as well. Having a technology entrepreneur in the family opens up interesting opportunities for collaboration between our legal services and his future ventures." His attempt to position the situation as beneficial for Amanda's professional development was gracious, but she seemed unable to respond with anything beyond a weak nod. The carefully constructed evening that was supposed to advance her career had instead highlighted her failure to recognize or support her own brother's remarkable accomplishments. As more guests approached me with congratulations and questions, I found myself watching Amanda with growing concern. The vindication I'd imagined feeling was replaced by genuine worry about the emotional impact this revelation was having on someone I still cared about despite the evening's humiliation. The success felt hollow when it came at the cost of family relationships that should have been strengthened by shared celebration, rather than damaged by unexpected revelations. As the initial excitement of congratulations began to settle, I realized that this moment represented something far more significant than personal vindication. The evening had exposed fundamental problems in how my family communicated, supported each other, and defined success. Simply enjoying the reversal of fortune wouldn't address the deeper issues that had led to such painful misunderstandings. I stood up from the gift table and moved toward the center of the room, drawing everyone's attention with a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. "Could I have everyone's attention for a moment? I'd like to say something." The conversations quieted as guests turned toward me with expectant faces. Some looked curious about what I might reveal next. Others appeared nervous about potential awkwardness, and a few seemed genuinely invested in hearing how I planned to handle this delicate family situation. First, thank you all for the congratulations. This acquisition represents 3 years of incredibly hard work, and having it recognized by people I respect means a great deal to me. I paused, making eye contact with various guests before continuing. But I want to address something more important than the business success. Amanda looked up from her chair with red eyes and visible anxiety about what I might say next. The vulnerability in her expression reminded me of childhood moments when we'd faced difficult situations together, long before professional competition and family expectations had complicated our relationship. When I was sitting over at that table tonight, watching all of you celebrate Amanda's birthday and professional achievements, I felt hurt and excluded. I won't pretend otherwise. But I also realized something important about the assumptions we all make about each other's value and potential. I walked closer to Amanda's chair, addressing my next comments directly to her while ensuring the entire room could hear. "Amanda, you've worked incredibly hard to build your legal career. You've earned recognition through talent, dedication, and strategic thinking that I genuinely admire. Nothing about my success diminishes what you've accomplished." She nodded slightly, though tears continued flowing down her cheeks. But somewhere along the way, we started measuring each other's worth through external validation, rather than supporting each other's dreams, regardless of conventional expectations. We became so focused on managing appearances that we forgot what family actually means. Harrison was listening with the focused attention of someone who'd mediated family conflicts in estate planning situations. His professional experience had taught him that money often revealed deeper relationship dynamics rather than solving them. The money from this acquisition is life-changing, but it's not the most important thing that happened tonight. What matters is that we all learned something about making assumptions about supporting family members, even when we don't understand their choices, and about measuring success in ways that bring families together, rather than driving them apart. I turned to address my parents directly. Dad, Mom. I should have communicated better about what I was building and why it mattered to me. But I also needed you to trust that I was working towards something meaningful, even without complete information about the business details. Robert stepped forward with visible emotion. You're absolutely right, son. We should have shown more faith in your judgment and more interest in understanding your work. Success isn't just about conventional career paths, and we lost sight of that. Patricia nodded in agreement, wiping her own tears as she processed the evening's revelations. We made assumptions based on what we could see, rather than asking questions about what you were actually building. That wasn't fair to you or to our family relationships, but the conversation I needed to have was with Amanda, who had orchestrated the seating arrangement that started this entire emotional journey. I moved to the chair beside her and sat down, creating a more intimate space for what needed to be said. Amanda, I want to understand what happened tonight. Why did you feel like you needed to hide me from your colleagues? What were you afraid they would think or say? She struggled to find words that could explain the complex motivations behind her decision. I was scared, she finally admitted. Scared that if they knew about your situation, they would think less of our family, less of me. I know that sounds terrible, but I've worked so hard to build credibility in this firm. What situation? I asked gently. What exactly did you think they needed to be protected from? I thought you were unemployed, she whispered. I thought you were living off our parents while pursuing unrealistic dreams. I didn't want them to judge me for having a brother who couldn't support himself. The honesty in her answer was painful, but necessary. She'd made decisions based on genuine fears about professional reputation, even though those fears had led her to treat her own brother as a liability rather than a family member deserving support. But even if I had been unemployed, I said carefully, would that have justified hiding me in the corner? Would my financial situation determine whether I deserved to sit with my own family at your birthday celebration? The question hung in the air as Amanda confronted the implications of her choices. Around us, guests were listening with obvious discomfort, but also recognition that they were witnessing an important family conversation that required honesty rather than diplomatic deflection. No, she said finally. It wouldn't have justified any of it. I let my professional anxieties override my family loyalty, and that was wrong regardless of your employment status. Her acknowledgement opened space for the kind of reconciliation that felt genuine, rather than forced by changed circumstances. This wasn't about my sudden wealth earning different treatment, but about recognizing that family relationships should be based on love and support rather than professional calculation. I forgive you, I said, reaching over to take her hand. But I want us to be better than this going forward. I want us to support each other's dreams even when we don't understand them completely. I want us to celebrate each other's successes without feeling threatened by them. Amanda squeezed my hand and nodded with visible relief. I want that too. And I want to learn about what you've been building, not because it's suddenly worth millions of dollars, but because it's important to you. As we spoke, I noticed Harrison approaching with a thoughtful expression. Clyde, Amanda, I hope you don't mind me interjecting, but this conversation reminds me of something important about family businesses and wealth transitions. The most successful families are those who maintain strong relationships, regardless of individual achievements or financial circumstances. He paused, looking around the room at guests who were still processing the evening's dramatic developments. I'd like to propose something if I may. Clyde, you're about to need sophisticated legal services for wealth management, business formation, and ongoing corporate affairs. Amanda, your firm has exactly the expertise he'll require. The suggestion was brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than allowing my success to create further distance between us, it offered an opportunity for genuine collaboration based on mutual professional respect. I'd like to explore that possibility, I said, looking at Amanda with renewed appreciation for her legal skills. I'll need help structuring investments, setting up charitable foundations, and managing ongoing business relationships. Working with someone I trust would make all the difference. Amanda's smile was the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen from her all evening. I would love to help you with that. It would mean so much to work together rather than feeling like we're competing. As family members and guests began approaching us with renewed warmth and genuine interest in collaboration, rather than networking, I realized that the evening's most important success wasn't the acquisition announcement, but the opportunity it created for healing damaged relationships. The money would change many things about my life, but the conversation we just shared had the potential to change something far more valuable: our family's capacity to support each other through both struggles and successes. Martha approached with characteristic timing and a proposal that captured the evening's transformed spirit. "Clyde, I think you should make an announcement about your plans for some of this newfound wealth. People are curious about what comes next." I stood up again, feeling more confident about addressing the group after the conversation with Amanda. "Actually, I have been thinking about that. I want to establish a foundation that supports young entrepreneurs who are developing innovative technology but struggling to get initial funding or recognition." The announcement generated immediate interest from guests who could envision various ways to contribute their own expertise to such an initiative. Harrison began discussing legal structures for charitable organizations, while other guests offered insights about business mentorship and industry connections. "And I'd like Amanda's firm to handle all the legal work for the foundation," I added, looking at her with genuine enthusiasm. "This could be an opportunity for us to work together on something that makes a meaningful difference for other families facing similar challenges." The evening that had begun with my exclusion from family celebration was ending with plans for family collaboration on projects that could impact thousands of other entrepreneurs and families. The transformation felt both surprising and completely natural, as we discovered new ways to combine our different talents toward shared goals. As guests began preparing to leave, many approached me with business cards, collaboration ideas, and genuine expressions of respect that would have seemed impossible earlier in the evening. But more importantly, I saw Amanda receiving similar attention from colleagues who now viewed her family connections as assets rather than potential liabilities. Derek approached for one final conversation before departing. "Clyde, I owe you a sincere apology for tonight. My comments were out of line, and I hope you'll give me a chance to make it right. I'd love to discuss some investment opportunities if you're interested." "I appreciate that," I replied, shaking his hand with complete sincerity. Success isn't about holding grudges. It's about building relationships that help everyone achieve their potential. As the evening concluded and guests departed with promises to reconnect soon, our immediate family gathered around the dining room table for a much different conversation than anyone had anticipated when the party began. "I have a question for all of you," I said, looking around at parents and sister who had shared this emotional journey. "What did we learn tonight about how we want to treat each other going forward, not because of money or professional success, but because we're family?" The conversation that followed lasted until nearly midnight, as we discussed communication support assumptions and the kind of family relationships we wanted to build regardless of individual circumstances. It was the most honest and productive family discussion we'd had in years. When we finally prepared to leave, Amanda pulled me aside for one last private conversation. "Clyde, I need you to know something. Even if you hadn't become successful tonight, what I did was wrong. I should have been proud to introduce you as my brother regardless of your employment status or financial situation." "I know," I replied, "and I should have trusted you enough to share what I was working on instead of keeping it completely secret." We both contributed to the misunderstandings. As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, I reflected on an evening that had changed far more than my financial circumstances. The acquisition would certainly transform my lifestyle and opportunities, but the conversations with my family had the potential to transform something even more valuable: our capacity to love and support each other through whatever challenges and successes the future might bring. The text message I'd sent to Jason hours earlier had indeed changed everything, but not in the ways I'd originally anticipated. Success without family relationships would have felt empty, but success combined with healed relationships and shared future goals felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. Sometimes the most important victories aren't about proving others wrong, but about creating opportunities for everyone to be right together. Before I sign off, I want to ask you something that's been on my mind since sharing this story. Have you ever felt like your family didn't believe in your dreams or support your unconventional choices? How did you handle those situations, and what would you do differently if you could go back? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own family dynamics, please consider liking this video and sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing about second chances and family reconciliation. Your support means everything to creators like me who believe in the power of authentic storytelling. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy stories about real people overcoming challenges and finding success against the odds. I share new stories every week about triumph, redemption, and the complicated relationships that shape our lives. Thank you for listening to my family's story, and I wish you the courage to pursue your own dreams, regardless of what others might think. Sometimes the people who doubt us most are the ones who end up celebrating our success the loudest if we give them the chance to grow alongside us.